All right, so live once more. All right, so it is been an interesting week, and right now, as we're kicking off Friday morning, my daughter is doing A-level maths exam this morning, so hopefully she's doing well. I'm not sure it's started yet, but hopefully, wish her well. Send her your prayers if you want. But yeah, been an interesting week. I thought in this sort of live, I'd talk a little bit about ideal clients and more specifically, kind of, I guess, ideal clients, find your ideal clients, and maybe something as another concept to think about of who's not your ideal client. Which I was reminded this week how important that is, not just knowing who you want to focus on, but also who you don't want to focus on, like who you want to attract and also specifically who you want to repel. And in some ways, and the way I'm feeling this week, it's probably I've neglected the repelling part this week. Well, say this week in a campaign that I set up last week. And sometimes I think part of the danger of me being me, and maybe you can relate to this, is because I collect so much information. I've talked before, like ideas, coming up with new ideas is really about connecting dots. So it's like collect the dots to connect the dots. Actually, I saw somebody using my quote. I thought it was my original quote. Maybe it wasn't, but I saw somebody using it this week. I thought, sure, that's my line. But hey, I ain't precious about it. Not much anyway. So I'm always collecting information. I've always got ideas. I'm always looking at things. And I think sometimes the danger in that is that I'll forget a basic thing. I'll get excited about something and want to try it out. That's my whole thing. It's like if I learn something or I come across something, I immediately want to use it. I want to try it. I want to find out if it works. I want to find out how I need to tweak it to make it work for me. And then, of course, that's what I can then share. So if I get a good result from it, then I want to share it with you. But by the same token, I never, and this is kind of one of my principles that I live by, I would never share an idea with somebody that I hadn't used. So if I read something in a book or I hear it from someone else, then, and don't get me wrong, I know there are people out there that do this. They just literally take somebody else's idea and then just regurgitate it. Not saying they regurgitate it necessarily as their own idea. They might give credit to where the idea came from, but all they're really doing is acting almost as a collection. They're collecting the information, they're sharing it back out with somebody. But for me personally, I think there's value in that because at least you get some awareness of certain ideas and principles and ideas that you could use. But for me personally, I can't do that. I have to, if I hear something and I collect an idea, it's like, well, let me go use it first so that I can not just regurgitate it, but I can also give you my insights into it, my experience of it. And also what I absolutely know to be true is just because something worked, if you like, out the box for someone else, in no shape, way, or form means it's going to work out the box for me without some modification because I'm not them. So I don't have the same life experience. I don't have necessarily the same resources available or, so it's like there's all sorts of differences. So there's no point from my point of view. It's like I can't really add more value if all I do is take an idea that I've just read in a book and share it with you. I can only add more value if I take the idea, use it, play with it, get results from it, then share it with you. So the whole point of this, I collect ideas. That was a bit of an aside, but I collect ideas. And then beyond that, this week I was, as I say, I put together a marketing campaign and I run it. And what's great about the internet, of course, is you know very quickly whether something's working or not. And it just completely bombed. I mean, in the sense of, whether something works or not, Facebook, Google, they're still going to take your money. They're not in the business of caring whether your advertising works for you or not. They're in the business of saying, we've got a platform. Here it is. You can go stick things up there and we'll share them with people you want to share them with. But if it doesn't work and doesn't make any money, sell a B. You still got to pay us. So, so obviously I'm paying them, but I wasn't getting a result from it. And so I was very disappointed. And I'm not sure why it disappointed me so much. It's not the first time something's failed. In fact, part of life, I would say most of the things I do don't succeed immediately. It's like they take some adjusting, some revamping, some learning from, because obviously that whole idea of take action, get feedback, take action, get feedback. But for some reason, this one really bothered me. I think because it looked on the surface to be working, but then actually completely didn't do anything that I wanted it to do. So I went through it. So like, when I'm in that position, as I talk about a lot of times, sit down with my journal and I just start analyzing. It's like, okay, so what's going on? And I'll start with me. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? How do I want to feel? What's the lessons in this? What did I miss? What did I not do? What do I need to get from this? Is there something missing in my skill set that I need to fill in? So all these sort of thoughts go through my head. I write them down as questions. But fundamentally, what I came back to was fundamentals. It's like, okay, looking at this campaign, there isn't a compelling argument. There's the beginnings of a compelling argument, but there's not a full emotionally compelling argument. So it's like, okay, make sure every time you put something together, there's a compelling argument in there. And what I say, as I'm saying, what I wrote was, this is the danger of being me. It's like I collect so much information so that I've got so much in my database to connect ideas with that, as I've demonstrated for myself this week, it's easy to miss something. But to miss something that's so fundamental is, well, I'm glad I found out this week, and I'm glad I found out before I ended up wasting too much money. But it's like make sure I've got the fundamentals. So it's a reminder that I should create checklists and stick to checklists, so that I should always look at them and not just assume I've seen it a million times before, I know what's on there. Make sure I look at it every single time. I guess it's a bit like, a pilot. A pilot doesn't get on a plane and go, I did a flight check last week. I did a flight check the day before that. I've done enough. I don't need to do them anymore. They do a flight check every single time before they take off, because that's part of the process. And I guess for me, I need to do that more often. It's like I'm more creative. I'm not I think I've talked about this before, Myers-Briggs profiles. I'm a perceiver. I'm not a judger. So judges, everything's got a task and it's in line, and they'll remember to check. They're good with checklists. They'll remember to look at them every single time. Perceivers, I'm more creative, want to do it my way, want to play with it. So sometimes I forget, but of course, the reason checklists exist is because there's value in them. So I've got to make sure I use them more often. So anyway, say hello if you're listening. Let me know where you're from. Even if you listen to this on the replay, again, just drop me a little comment. Let me know where you are so I get an idea of where in the world you might be, and an idea of kind of what's going on for you. How's your week been? Has it been good? Has it been bad? Has it been indifferent? Have you made a dent in a goal that you want to make a dent in? Have you achieved something that's really excited you? Has something happened that you didn't expect but has been a pleasant surprise? That Tony Robbins question, do you like surprises? And everyone says yes. And it's like, you like the surprises you like. Obviously, surprises you don't like. Big bills dropping through the door that you weren't expecting. That kind of surprise, none of us need. But yeah, so what's been going on for you? Let me know. As I say, whether you're watching live, whether you're in the replay, just let me know. Let me know where you are. Let me know what's been going on for you. So beyond that, other things that I've been doing this week, this morning, I've been putting together a new module, which I'm actually going to release to my Strategic Rebel Den members. And I've been thinking about language patterns, because it's an area that doesn't get talked about a lot. But in relation to, I've been following Rich Sheffrin, big shout out to Rich. I've been following Rich Sheffrin. I've been watching some of his lives in replay. I tend to watch him in replay. And he's been talking the last few weeks about copywriting. And copywriting is very much about words. It's like how you use words to influence someone so they reach ultimately a buying decision in the case of a sales letter. So it got me thinking. I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks, but I've had this idea that I wanted to share ideas on language and how I use language, and specifically some of the language patterns that I very deliberately use when I'm presenting, whether it's live or whether it's I don't write sales letters. That's not me, but I do write video sales letters, and I do create webinars, and I do create presentations designed to sell. And there's a lot of language in what I do, which I have tested, in the sense of, if I do something a certain way, do I get a better result? And by better result, I mean a higher conversion. And if I don't use it, do I consistently get a lower conversion? So these are things that I've tested, and I had, I think probably the greatest experience back, initially, 2004, 2005, around that time anyway, where, when I was doing 2 presentations a day, 6 days a week. And so I had a massive opportunity to test all sorts of things, and language was a big one. And where I originally got my understanding of language was from neurolinguistic programming. So, I went through NLP and I studied, there's 2 big models in there, Milton model and the Satir model. So I went, or what's called the meta model. So I went through both of those, and Milton was a hypnotherapist. So his whole thing was being artfully vague. Hey, Rajesh, no worries. Yeah, good idea that you're out walking. Good for you. Good for your health, good for your brain, good for everything, actually, walking. Did you know, by the way, this is trivia for you, that humans there is no other animal on the planet that can walk as far in a 24-hour period as a human. Like, we are built to walk, and we are built to walk long distances. Not that we do that very often, but we are built for that, which is why walking's so good for us. So Erickson was a hypnotherapist and described as artfully vague. And the guys that set up neurolinguistic programming or founded it, Richard Bandler, John Grinder, my understanding is they modeled Erickson and pulled out some of the language patterns that he was using. And so that they could obviously replicate some of the results he was getting in terms of putting people in a trance. So that's where I started with language. And then what I did was I took it away and I used to do little exercises. It's a bit like, you'll often hear people say, if you want to get good at copywriting, then, dig out some really great old sales letters and just write them out by hand repeatedly. And there's an element of osmosis about that. So anyway, I used to do that. And I used to do that with language patterns as well. So I'd kind of take one of Erickson's categories of language patterns and I'd come up with 20, 30, 40 different variations on it. And that's how I embedded it in myself. But then when it came to presenting, I threw all these in. I started using them, even through to Erickson was famous for his embedded commands. So this is where you give someone a command, but it's wrapped up in a question or it's wrapped up in something else. So it's more artfully vague. It's not directive. So I used to play with this as well. And certainly embedded commands consistently increased my sales conversion. So I still use them. But anyway, so the bottom line is, just before I was doing this, I was starting to record that. And I've turned it into, as I say, I'm going to release it this month to the Strategic Rebel Den members. So they're going to see that. It's going to be fairly meaty in terms of a module, in terms of information. Probably one of the most detailed things I've done, because I'm more of a strategist, big picture person. And it's interesting, though, because my challenge with teaching language is it's actually very dull. So, if you just look at, and particularly if you look at, say, NLP and the Milton model, then some of the labels for some of the language patterns are just, it's like they went out of the way to come up with the most asinine, boring, difficult to pronounce labels possible. It's like, that doesn't help. So it was like, how do I make it exciting? So the way I've done it is to put it in a context, put something in a context. So put it in the context of selling and making more money, then obviously it brings it alive. That's what I've done. So that's what I've been working on. So I started recording the first part of that this morning. So I've done the introduction and I'll sort of get into that and I'll release that this month. So that'll all be good. But as I say, this week, my big failing was a campaign that bombed completely. And what I really got from that in terms of analyzing it and reviewing it was very much that, one, it needs a compelling argument. The argument wasn't compelling enough. And secondly, because of that, to recognize that actually at the beginning of a campaign, the thing that makes the biggest difference is the message. And is the message doing two things? Is it attracting the right people? And is it repelling the wrong people? So that if somebody read it, they'd immediately go, that's me, I want to know more, or that's not me, and just keep scrolling and just keep going. Because there's little point in having somebody, this is more useful actually. This is how you compare YouTube to Facebook. Like Facebook, they charge by impression. YouTube charge by somebody watching at least 30 seconds of your video ad. So in that 30 seconds, you've got way more time to actually get real specific and very deliberately repel the people you don't want to watch beyond the 30-second mark. So it's being very powerful in that respect. Otherwise, you can have a whole bunch of people who are intrigued by your video ad, intrigued enough to want to keep watching beyond the 30-second mark, but they're not actually the right people for you at all. They're never going to buy it. They're not the people you want to be helping. So that kind of got me thinking about this. And so as a thought process for I'm going live, what shall I talk about? I thought, let's talk about ideal clients. Everybody goes on about this. I can't say that I've ever seen a single business coach or some sort of guru talking about you got to know who your ideal client is. What I don't think there's enough talked about is how you find your ideal client. And more importantly, and this definitely doesn't get talked about, is knowing who your anti-client is. So from an ideal client point of view, you want people that, first and foremost, you actually want as customers. So if you look in it in terms of, okay, if you break down customers into two very simple boxes, then obviously there's people who have the money to buy what you've got to offer. And there are people that don't have the money to buy what you have to offer. And that's kind of fairly obvious. So like you want to eliminate the people who aren't in a position to actually do something. And that's a starting point. But then within that umbrella of people who have the money to buy what you've got to offer, who do you actually want to work with? Because you get to decide this. And this comes back to the whole point of having a business is to have a better lifestyle. So I don't want to spend my time working with clients that I don't like, which means I really want to work with people. And this is where most people, I think, don't go beyond. They just look at it in terms of, okay, has this person got money? Can this person buy what I've got to offer? Then I want them as a client. I don't think that way. I used to. I don't think that way. I think in terms of, I want to know more. What sort of values does this person have? Are they someone that I'm aligned with? Ideally, I'd like to have more clients like me who think more like me because I can help them the most. And they're from my point of view, obviously I'm biased, they're going to be nicer people for me to work with. So look at it in those terms. I had a friend years ago who is or was a financial advisor and very good at what he did. And ultimately, when he started out, and this is also a lesson in starting out, when he started out, he was like, well, my clients are people who want financial advice. You know, it was as vague as that. And I want to say as well, there's nothing wrong with being as vague as that when you start. Like, I'm a big believer that action creates clarity. So get started. It's like, don't use any of what I'm about to say as a means to procrastinate. Don't use it as to say, well, I'm not clear who my ideal client is, so I'm not getting started. It's like, no, get started. I put up a quote yesterday because it resonated with me. It was relevant to me. And it's a Seneca quote. And I put it up on LinkedIn. And I was sharing it this morning with my daughter, actually. It talks about, it says, it's not that we don't dare because things are difficult. Things are difficult because we don't dare. And I would say live by that, because what Seneca's saying and was saying, 2,000 years ago, is take action. Don't look at something and go, that's too difficult. Like, don't think, oh, ideal client, I'll never work out who that is. I don't understand it. I don't get it. And I see people like this. I see this in the comments on Facebook. I see this in the way they talk. I listen to some of the conversations on group calls. I hear all these things. So I'm aware that people I'm struggling with finding out who my ideal client is. And because I haven't got that out, then I haven't been able to do the next step. And it's like, no. And I think there's a misunderstanding here. And again, this is just based on my experience, my belief. And there's going to be other experiences and other perceptions. And there may be, and I'm sure there are way more smart people out there than I am. But by the same token, I think if I have anything going for me, it's my desire to just get on with it. So in the same way, like I said right at the beginning, if I read something in a book and go, that's a nice idea, then I'll go use it because I want to find out, does it work? And I want to find out, can I make it work? Or do I need to adjust it in some way? And then from sharing that with you, then there's more value in it because I've actually experienced it. So in the same way, it's like my default mode is get on with it. My default mode, I guess, is the Nike whole expression of just do it. So if you are thinking about knowing your ideal client, obviously makes a difference in terms of being able to write messages for them, create great compelling arguments for them, create great campaigns for them. But first of all, understand, I have never written a presentation in my life that is perfect because nothing is perfect. I've never, actually very rarely, I'd say like 1 in a million, where everybody in the room bought what I was offering, like 100% conversion rate. I mean, that is so rare. And that only happened because they were people that absolutely would resonate with what I was talking about. They had already demonstrated they were the kind of people that bought those kind of programs. So it wasn't a cold audience. So I've never been in front of an audience that's never heard of me before, who just has a generic interest in entrepreneurial or property, who has typically, a good result would be 20% or 30% of the room. But something like 100% of the room doesn't happen. So perfection is not about, none of this is about perfection. It's not about having 100% of the people buy from you 100% of the time, ever. So your ideal client will evolve over time. As you evolve as well, things will change. So your ideal client will evolve. And in the beginning, it's like, just get started. Have some idea of who you want to work with. So in the broadest sense, I'm interested in people who are entrepreneurially minded. I'm interested in people who are entrepreneurially minded, want a business that gives them more freedom, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in creating a business that makes billions a year, but keeps me tied to a desk 24 hours a day. I don't want that. That's no point. That's not a life to me. So I'm not in this to make as much money as possible. That's never been my biggest driver anyway. I am in the business of making as big an impact as possible, but I'm in the business of making a sum of money which allows me to achieve my financial goals and my lifestyle goals. And when I say lifestyle, I include in that, building up trust funds for my children, making sure that I've got money so that I never have to think about, like, I don't have to work if I don't want to. So that sort of thing. And also being able to contribute to the projects and the charities that I'm interested in. Like, that's part of my lifestyle. And that's what I'm about. Whereas, there are other people who purely driven by money. And so their whole thing is, well, I want to collect, and gain as much as possible. I have no judgment about that. If that makes them happy, fantastic. But that's not me. So my ideal client wouldn't be that person ever. Because even if I believe they would get value from what I sell, and I believe they would from a business point of view, I wouldn't want to work with them long term. Does that make sense? Because we'd be at loggerheads all the time, because what I'm trying to achieve and what I want to help other people achieve isn't what they want. Like, there's a mismatch in terms of the goal, which kind of leads to think about what are the goals that you want to achieve? What are the goals that your customers want to achieve? So in other words, if you're saying, who do I want to work with? Then yes, very broadly speaking, you want people who can afford what you're offering. I get it. Beyond that, though, who do you really want to be working with? Would your ideal client be somebody who wants to make as much money as possible in the shortest period of time possible? Is your client someone who wants a lifestyle? Is your client someone who's more interested in impact than money? Who is the person you want to work with? And it obviously ties in with what you're promoting and selling as well. If you're selling health-related products or fitness or health, weight loss or things like that, again, who are the clients you want to work with? Are there clients that you share values with in the sense of they want to lose weight, so they want to be fitter and have more energy so they can spend more time and be around more for their family? Like, they want to live longer and actually spend more time with and see their children grow up, see their grandchildren grow up. That's something that's important to me. So, in the world of health and longevity, then I want to attract people who want to see their children grow up, who want to see their grandchildren grow up. That's relevant to me. That's not necessarily relevant to someone else. Someone else might be, well, I just want to be in shape because I want to look good. There's one of the human needs that drives all of us is significance, the need to be significant. But think about what significance means. Significance means that I think I'm better than the people around me. That's how humans feel significant. In other words, I want to build the biggest building in town, bigger than everybody else's. That makes me feel significant. So significance by its nature has an element of comparing yourself to other people, but it's how you compare yourself. So do I get my significance by saying I've been around longer for my children, my grandchildren, so I can support them and help them and guide them? That's one way of feeling significant. Versus, I look the best. I've got the best abs. I've got the best biceps. I've got the best chest. I've got the right ratio between the size of my thighs and the size of my waist. Like, I've got no interest in that kind of stuff. But I know people who have. And therefore, if you were selling fitness, for example, you might want to work with those kind of people because they're the right people for you. I guess it's that expression that they're my kind of people. So part of understanding who your ideal client is who are your people? Who are your kind of people? And I think that's very important for your sanity as much as anything else. Because, to stay on board and like building a business is hard. It's not straightforward. It's not common sense. It's a lot of fun, but understand that in order to stick with it and get to that place, I think I've talked about this before, like I don't think in terms of persistence. I don't think I'm persistent because that sounds like a lot of effort. So I don't effort at business. I stay in flow at business. And actually thinking about it as I'm thinking out loud now, if I ever get to a place where I feel I'm putting in a lot of effort and I need to be like persistent effortfully, is that a word? Then I'd think I was doing something wrong. And I'd be like, okay, something would be wrong without a doubt. It's like something's wrong, something's missing. I'm going about it the wrong way. Because it shouldn't be effort. It should be fun. It should be flow. Doesn't mean that isn't hard work. Hard work can still be fun and still be flow, but it should be fun and it should be flow. So if you have an idea of my ideal client is someone that can afford me, great. And what are their values? What's important to your ideal client? And often that starts with being self-reflective and thinking about you. What's important to you? So values are what's called context dependent. That means different areas of your life, you'll have different values. So if you start with life values, you might, as an exercise, sit down and write at the top of the page, what's important to me about my life. And then from there, whatever comes out your head are your values. And stick with it, stay with it. Put some effort. I've just said don't do effort. Yeah, put some time into it. That's more relevant, so that you actually, because if you're going to get the first, if you say what's important, if I ask you now what's important about your life to you, you're going to give me immediately 2 or 3 answers. And it's like, well, sit with it, go beyond the 2 or 3, go deeper, so that you'll come up then with another stream. And this is how it works. It tends to come out in streams. You'll then come up with another 3, 4 answers, and then you'll kind of pause again. And it's like, sit with it, and then you'll come up with another 3, 4 answers. And then obviously you'll have like a list of maybe 10, 15, 20 values. And then you can kind of go through those and think about, well, which are more important? So, if you've got a list of 20 values, which one would be the top value, which would be the second top, and so on and so on and so on. And that kind of gives you an idea of what's important to you. And then think about those in relation to your ideal clients. So which of these values would you want your ideal clients to have, so that you understand them? Because this is a powerful exercise, not just in terms of determining those ideal clients, but if you're thinking of it in terms of values. If you know someone's values, then being able to influence them becomes much easier, because of course you include those values in everything you do. They become part of your marketing campaigns. They become part of your web classes. They become part of your video sales letters. It's much easier to influence. So it's easier to start that way. So that's an added benefit to doing that as an exercise. But look at it in terms of, okay, these are my values. These are things that resonate. These are the values I want my clients to have. So going back to my friend that I mentioned, who was a financial advisor. When he started out, it was kind of anybody's a client. Then he realized that actually needed to narrow that down, because he didn't have the time and the energy, and there wasn't enough hours in a day to just deal with anybody. So he narrowed it down originally to IT contractors. So people who would have 6-month, 12-month contracts with a company, working in the IT department, helping with programming, system design, whatever it might be. And then after a while of doing that, and based on me sitting down with him one day over coffee and saying, how much work do you have to put in with these clients? And if you had a client that's worth 10 million or a client that's worth 100,000, what's the difference in the amount of work you put in? And he said, well, there's not much difference at all. And I was like, well, which would generate the most fees for you? He said, well, obviously the client that's got 10 million. I said, so why don't you just work with those kind of clients? And it was a big revelation for him. And his initial thought was, will they take me seriously? So obviously all that doubt and fear came up. And that's something else you might need to deal with when you do these kind of exercises. Recognize they're going to come up, in which case, think about the fear and move through it rationally. Think about it, break it down. So I moved him past that. And then he actually did. He built his business around successful business owners, because they were the people that had 10 million and more to invest, to actually put under management. But within that, as he started to develop that, as it evolved, he realized that, you could go out, he could get introductions to people. He was very good at networking. He got introductions to people that were successful business owners. They tended at the time to be men, because he was kind of guy that, it was really easy for me to hang out with. We got on like a house on fire, but he was kind of somebody, he was a bit of a man's man in some respects. So he ended up evolving it and going, well, actually, I only want to work with other men. I don't particularly want to work with female entrepreneurs. And it's like, fine, it's your choice, your business. But then within that category of, male entrepreneurs who've got 10 million to invest, he began to realize he didn't want some of the people he was meeting, he didn't like. And so and in the beginning, he was like, well, do I take this person because they've got the criteria of generating plenty of fees for me, money side, or do I look at it in terms of, do I really want this person in my life? Because for him, clients were very personal. Like, he would talk to them on a regular basis. He would have to spend time with them. So hanging out with people he really didn't want to spend time with wasn't going to be good for his sanity and wasn't good for his business long term. So he realized that actually there were certain values that he wanted in the people that he wanted as clients. And one of them was that they had to be spiritually minded, because he was spiritually minded and he was into all sorts of things, some of which might be a little bit woo-woo in some other people's opinions. But for him, they were relevant. They were relevant to me. That's some of the things we talked about. And so he wanted those kind of clients. And, classic example, he went to see a client one day, a prospect. He sat down with this guy. He had a long conversation with him. And at the end of it, he said, yeah, sorry, I can't take you as a client. And the guy was really upset. Like, he was someone who was used to getting his own way. He was someone that was used to, because he'd been so successful, his significance was off the roof in terms of, I'm better than 99.9% of other people because I've done so well in business that most people never achieve. That's how he thought. He was that kind of significance driven. And from my friend's point of view, he's like, I don't want that kind of person in my life. This guy wasn't spiritually minded. And this guy pushes, like, what do you mean? He's like, I've got, I fit the criteria, take me on as a client. And Steve in the end just said, look, I couldn't possibly inflict you on my team. And that was how he described it. He said, couldn't possibly inflict you on my team. I care too much about my team to put them in a position where they'd have to deal with somebody like you. So you can imagine this guy was really annoyed, really upset. And Steve said, it's all cool, I'm leaving. And so the guy never became a client. But it's like highlights. Values are important. What is important to you? What is it you want to be important to your ideal customers, your ideal clients? So there's some overlap. And I would suggest that you get clear on that to begin with. Because if you understand someone's values, then if we're going to write a marketing message, we can play to that. Like if I was going to tell a story that was designed to attract the clients my friend wanted as a financial advisor, then it would be a story related to starting out, being successful, growing a business, but also recognizing that in order to be fulfilled in life, you wanted more of the spiritual aspect in your life, or there's more to life than just making money. So, and that might even be a headline that I would test. I might even test if I was trying to attract great clients for my friend's finance services company. I might even test a headline that says there's more to life than making money, isn't there? That might get somebody's attention. Especially someone who's made 10 million or more, they're going to be like, oh, well, yeah. Or no. In which case, if they say no, what have I just done? I've repelled the people I don't want. So this is why it's valuable to understand the kind of people you want. So think of it in terms of, who do I want? What are their values? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Are they in alignment with my goals? Are they in alignment with my values, my aspirations? Because the more there is an alignment, the more fun it's going to be for you. Simple as that. And the easier it's going to be for you to reach them. So beyond, and this is probably a different conversation to maybe other conversations you've heard around the idea of an ideal client. But from my point of view, it's like, I want people that I want to hang out with. I want people as customers, even if I never get to speak to them, but they just buy my courses or whatever it might be. I still want them to be those kind of people because, one, they're going to resonate. Like, obviously, if they're listening to me talking and explaining a concept in a course, then my values are going to come in. I can't not have my values come in because they're part of who I am. They're part of my identity. So I'm going to tell stories that are relevant to things that are important to me in my life. So that's going to come across. So therefore, they're more likely to resonate with what I'm sharing, use what I'm sharing, therefore get a result from what I'm sharing. So that's important. I want people that are going to use what I share and get a result from it, because then they're happy. Because what happens if they don't get a result from what I'm sharing? They're more like, say, give me a refund. Do I want a whole bunch of customers who all they do is listen to what I'm sharing, go, I don't like you, give me my money back? No, that's not a business. I'm not then making any kind of impact. All I'm doing is spending all day collecting money and giving it back. That's not useful to me. It's not useful to them. It's not useful to the greater good. So I want people then who share similar values. I want people who are going to use what I share with them so that they actually get a result, which now ties in nicely with, who do I not want? So understanding your ideal client also means take the time to flip it. It's a whole Star Wars thing. You use the Force for good, or you can use the Force and go to the dark side. So the dark side is your anti-persona, your anti-client, your anti-customer, the person you don't want at all. And you can take what you've got and flip it. So I don't want people who just listen and don't take action, because if they don't take action, they won't get a result. If they don't get a result, what was the point? They're more likely to be disappointed. They're more likely to go away and say, oh, that didn't work, because they're not taking any personal responsibility. So I want people who take personal responsibility. I want to repel people who don't. Someone who's got no accountability to themselves, someone who does no self-reflection, someone who's doesn't realize that they are a massive part of the equation of getting success, I don't want as a client ever. They would be, and they have, I've made this mistake in the past. They're a pain in the backside because they don't do the work. And then who do they blame? Not themselves. they end up blaming me or they end up blaming my material. And it's like, look, if there was something that I shared that I didn't work, I'd put my hands up and say, this doesn't work. But that doesn't happen because I only share things that I use. It's a bit like I was Justin Brook, who runs a company called Ad Skills. Great company, great material. I've learned a lot from them around Facebook advertising, YouTube advertising, fantastic materials. And he talked like he's really aimed at agencies, so he's aimed at people who want to build an agency where they serve other customers, they serve other entrepreneurial clients who are focused on their product, focused on their service, but they're not necessarily great or don't want to spend the time developing the skills at YouTube advertising or Facebook advertising. They want someone to take care of that for them, which is where an agency comes in, which makes a lot of sense, by the way. If you're very focused on your product and you're not interested in the marketing of it, then you don't want to spend 10 years of your life getting good at marketing. You just want to bring in somebody that can do that bit so you can focus on being a great coach or whatever it might be. But what he talks about in there is, and the things he advises all of his clients who are building agencies is, from an ideal client perspective, only work with clients who've got an existing sales funnel. So in other words, he's saying to them, don't go out and try and take on clients who've got no proof of concept, who haven't got a product that they've sold successfully. Because if they haven't got a funnel already, buying traffic isn't going to make the funnel work. All it does is means they'll spend money potentially attracting great leads, but they've got no way of converting them. Which ties in with what I've said before. Nobody has a traffic problem, they have a conversion problem. But if you take on a client who, let's say I decide I want to be an agency. I've got no interest in being an agency, but let's say I want to be an agency and I go, I'm going to work with coaches. And so then I have a couple of people reach out to me. They go, I'm a coach. And I go, great. What do you do? And they go, well, I'm a mindset coach. I go, fantastic. Who's your clients? What do you sell? What package have you got? They go, I haven't got any of that. Like, I just help people do this. I was like, great. Which people? I don't know. Right. Then, but I want to be a client. And, here's my retainer fee for the first 3 months, blah, blah, blah. And, I recognize I've got another, whatever it is, let's say $10,000 put aside for advertising costs for the first few months. I'm like, okay. But what's going to happen is we're going to struggle to get anything working because they don't know who they're really after and they don't really know what they're selling. And so do I then say to them, look, and I would say to them, you don't know what you're selling and you don't know who you're selling it to. I can't help you. Or do I offer a different service where it's like, let me help you clarify what you're selling and who you're selling it to, which is completely different to being an agency. So what they really need is a business coach to help them clarify those things first, get it working. Because if it's working and they go, look, for every X number of leads that I bring in, I'm getting this many clients and this much profit. Great. Because now I could look at that and say, that works. That's the kind of person that's buying. Now let's develop a marketing campaign and send you a bunch more traffic so that you can grow that. That works. But that's why Justin says to all of these agency client, people who are building agencies, don't take on clients that don't have an existing funnel because it's not going to work. And then who they're going to blame? Themselves? No, you. And that's not good for you. So obviously that's then reflected in terms of, okay, I need clients who already have made money, who are already making sales, because otherwise I can't help them. Does that make sense? So you look at it in those terms. Because of course, people rarely blame themselves, that especially when it comes to advertising, because they're going to spend money on advertising and have a whole bunch of leads. If it doesn't work out, they're going to be like, well, you sent me the wrong clients. It's like, no, you didn't have a conversion process in place. But of course, it's a no-win argument because they're just going to continue to blame you. They're never going to look at themselves. So think of it in terms of, okay, who do you want as a client? Who do you not want? Who's the antithesis of who you'd want? So for me, people who've got no interest in being personally accountable, taking any kind of responsibility, who don't recognize that they're a big part of their own success and that they have to do the things that you share with them, that for example, they have to develop skills. If you want to be in the business of being an affiliate marketer, or you want to be in the business of creating and selling courses, you got to get good at creating and selling courses. And if you're not willing to learn those skills, it's unlikely you're going to have the kind of business that you want. So it's recognizing there is a learning curve and that you've got to actually put in the energy at the beginning to learn the skills. So I want to repel people that aren't willing to do that work. Does that make sense? So that's the antithesis. So I don't want get-rich-quick people, for example, because they're the kind of people that want to get rich quick without doing any work. They just want push button, thank you very much. Now, obviously, the danger, of course, is that push button is very attractive, very seductive, which is why you'll see so many offers for those kind of products. They don't work, because what works for me, push button, is based on the fact that I have a certain skill set and a certain experience and certain resources in place. Wouldn't necessarily be push button for someone else who hasn't got that skill set or those experiences or those beliefs in place. So you want to spend as much time thinking about who you don't want as much as you do about who you do want as a client. And also think of it in terms of their values as well. What are the values of the people you don't want? So values of the people I don't want are people that are looking for, they don't want to put in the work. They don't want to do any work in the beginning. They don't want to dig the reservoir. They don't do any of that kind of stuff. They don't want to take responsibility. They want to be able to blame other people. They want to always be able to point the finger at someone else. They don't, again, as I said, they don't want to take personal responsibility. So they're the antithesis of the people that I want. And so I could include that. I could put that, literally, I could put that in an ad. I could write that in a video saying, look, if you're this kind of person, this is not for you. And you'll see when I do my web classes, I always do 2 slides. One slide saying, you're the kind of person, this, and this. And then I flip it and say, but if you're this, and this isn't for you. And I'm very clear about it in my webinar. And there's 2 things that come out of that from a influence point of view, just as an aside. One is it helps you attract the people that you are going to attract are even more attracted to you because you just told the people they don't like not to bother. So in other words, the more you repel the wrong people, the more attractive you are to the right people. So it actually makes your ideal customer even more ideal, which is fantastic. So that's kind of just some thoughts on that. I think I've been talking long enough. So my original intention was kind of talk for half an hour live. I've gone a little bit further than that. So obviously any questions before, well, if you've got any questions, please put them in. If you listen to this in the replay, by all means, still put the questions in, the comments. I will come back to them and I will use them to kind of in the next live, and I'll go through the answers and explain things in more detail if it's going to help you. Because really I am here. I'm here to serve in a lot of ways. I have a real desire. I miss the live events. I miss getting out, and hopefully that's going to change shortly. And I will start putting on some live events again and get back out meeting real human beings in the flesh. But I miss that expressive energy. So that's why I'm enjoying doing the lives. But I want to make sure that I'm giving you stuff that is of relevance and is useful to you, that you can go away and actually action and do something with, or at least get you moving down a path where you're thinking more about it. So other than that, I'm going to wrap this up. As I said, my thoughts for this week are very much define your ideal client. Think about who you want as a client. Think about the kind of values they have. Think about your own values and make sure there's an overlap somewhere between the two so that you're attracting people who you resonate with. Think about who you don't want as clients. What would be the antithesis? What would be the kind of client you would hate to have? Because knowing both will strengthen both. So understand that. And then don't ever, if you get to a place where you're going, I've written this down, I've kind of got an idea of my ideal client is, then the only thing I would suggest beyond that is then lay on some demographics. So in other words, think about what age are these people, put that on. If gender's relevant to you, like you only want to work with women or you only work with men, put that on. But if it's not, then obviously it's both men and women. But beyond that, just then get started. Just get out and start writing messages from that perspective. Think about those people, think about what's going on in their life, and write from that perspective, those values. Just start doing any kind of content, articles, adverts, lives, videos. Just start doing stuff. And use doing stuff to get feedback, to get clear. Action creates clarity always. So you keep moving forward that way. All right. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of the day. I'm going to wrap this up because I've got a few other bits I need to get done this morning, and then I'm done for the day. And as I say, I will talk to you next week, next live. In the meantime, obviously leave me a comment. You got anything you want to say to me, by all means, drop me a line. All right. Take it easy, and I'll talk to you again next time.